Hello children, today we are going to take up a chapter from Vistas, The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck. Before we start with the presentation, I want to tell you, children, it is imperative to read the chapter. I know it's a long chapter, but first reading of the chapter is very important before you watch this presentation. So let's talk a little bit about the author, Pearl S. Buck, also known by her Chinese name Cai Zhenzu. She was the first American woman who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and she was awarded this prize for her rich and truly epic descriptions of peasant life in China. Those of you who have read the chapter would understand what I'm talking about when I refer to the ethical dilemma. So, when I talk of ethical dilemma, I would definitely recommend you Google this and watch a YouTube video about the trolley problem. You will understand what I'm trying to tell you, and those of you who have read it are aware of this moral dilemma that the main protagonist is going through in the story. So, ethical dilemma is when we are forced to make choices and the two options are not really very good. So, do we pick the action with the best outcome or stick to a moral code that prohibits causing someone's death? So, that is ethical dilemma. And I want you to please watch the trolley problem just as an extended activity to this chapter. The setting of the story, The Enemy, is during World War II. It takes place on a coastal town of Japan in the year 1941 when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. You must have read books, you might have seen movies on Pearl Harbor, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, all that happened, all the destruction that happened. And this destroyed not only human beings, but it destroyed relationship between two major countries, America and Japan. So before we read, let us understand what is the backdrop of the story. It is about an American prisoner of war who is washed ashore in a dying state and is found at the doorstep of a Japanese doctor, Dr. Sadao. So now you can imagine America and Japan, enemy countries, and citizen of America in a dying state is found near the house of a Japanese doctor. So you understand what I'm trying to tell you? The moral dilemma that I was referring to, it is about the dilemma that is in the mind of Dr. Sadao. He's a doctor, yet he is a Japanese too. So now what should he do? Think about it. Sadao's moral dilemma is all about the tussle that he faces. Should he use his surgical skills to save the life of a wounded person or hand an escaped American POW over to the Japanese police? So the biggest problem, the conflict that is going on in the mind of Dr. Sadao is to make this difficult choice, and it raises certain moral questions. Is Sadao's obligation to his country above the obligation he has to himself, to his family, and to his profession? What about the doctor's oath? What about all the vows that he has taken that he will pay attention to anybody who needs medical attention, irrespective of caste, color, creed, religion, region, or anything? So this is the tussle that is going on in the mind of Dr. Sadao, and you will find that it comes to the foreground throughout the story. Assuming that you've read the chapter, let's look at the point-wise recap of the lesson. So Dr. Sadao Hoki is a Japanese doctor. He was a renowned surgeon and he is very close to the general. Now here I would like to mention on the first page itself of the chapter, that's on page 24, we are introduced to his father. And his father quoting from the lesson, his father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side, "Those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan." So, yonder is an archaic usage of word, it's no longer used these days. But the significance of these lines, I want you to understand this line. So his father often used to take Sadao to South Sea Islands, where the hard-working Japanese people were busy building Japanese economy through industry. And he would always tell Sadao about the contribution of these people in making Japan a progressive country. Somewhere telling that how hardcore Japanese he was, the father. And now imagine, in spite of being a true Japanese, he aspired, he dreamt of sending Dr. Sadao to America for his higher studies. And for that was the only purpose of his life. It says in on page 25, first paragraph, it says Sadao knew that his education was his father's chief concern. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America, and actually, he came back at the age of 30 after getting a degree in medicine, learned surgery. At the same time, he was a scientist and he was trying to perfect a discovery which would render wounds clean. The same paragraph talks about his closeness with the general, because it says that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically, and for this possibility, Sadao was being kept in Japan. I'm just trying to draw your attention towards the fact that how indispensable Dr. Sadao was for the general, and that is why, even though it was mandatory to serve in the troops, Sadao was kept back. Okay, so yes, moving forward, Sadao was not allowed to accompany troops as he was indispensable to the general. He met his wife in America, where he had gone for higher studies to fulfill his father's dream. He fell in love with Hana after he came to know that she was Japanese. Now, this is really something very strange for a person to wait and then fall in love only when he comes to know that she was Japanese. And this was because his father would have never allowed him to get married. And that's why in the chapter on page 26, it says in the second paragraph, and when his father had seen her, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way. So again, drawing our attention towards the fact his father was a hardcore Japanese. He would not deter from his principle, his ideals as a Japanese. Okay, so they got married, and then one fine evening, as they were strolling at the beach near their house, they saw a wounded soldier. Soon they realized that he was an American prisoner of war. And then starts the major conflict in the mind of the doctor. So you understand, this is the tussle that I'm talking about, and it goes on throughout the chapter. So now he happens to stumble upon this man who's dying, who needs immediate medical attention, and Sadao doesn't know what to do because he has realized that he is an American, and all Americans are his enemies, and this line is repeated in the chapter many times. Finally, they both decide to carry the wounded soldier to their home. Sadao decides to operate and take out the bullet. His servants, naturally, they are uneducated, and for them, country is bigger than anything else. Country comes first, and that's why they do not approve of their master's actions. And there is a very important line on page 30 towards the end, which shows the sentiment of the servants, as well as it also shows that the servants were of a superstitious nature. Because quoting from the lesson, page 30, last paragraph, the master ought not to heal the wound of this white man, he said bluntly to Hana. The white man ought to die. First he was shot, then the sea caught him, and wounded him with her rocks. If the master heals what the gun did and what the sea did, they will take revenge on us. So clearly, they don't want their master, that's Dr. Sadao, to have anything to do with this American soldier, and they are of the belief that nature wants that this soldier should die. They feel their master has a soft corner because of his American degree, his American education. Yumi, that's the nanny of the children, she refuses obstinately to wash the American POW's wounds. As a result, Hannah washes his wounds and gives anesthesia and assists the doctor in the surgery. There is another point which shows that the doctor is completely engrossed in the operation. If you turn to page 35 and second paragraph, it says, my friend, he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. So when you look at the chapter, whenever there is a struggle between his profession and his country, you will find that it's the doctor who wins. And at this point, he is so engrossed in the operation that he actually addresses him as his friend. Now comes another important part in the story. When Hannah is assisting the doctor, she looks at the wounds on the neck of the red scars on the neck of the POW. His name is Tom, by the way. And when she looks at that, for some reason she is reminded of the fact that General Takima used to beat his wife. And when she thinks about that, she is left wondering, if a man who could be so cruel to his loved one, would he not be cruel to someone like the POW? So now you understand, essentially, she is thinking, what will happen when we turn him over to the police? So probably that is going on in her mind when she's looking at the scars of the prisoner of war. The surgery is done successfully by Dr. Sadao. Naturally, he was an excellent surgeon. The tussle starts now. Whether he should hand him over to the authorities like a true Japanese, he knows what's the outcome. If he gives him over to the police, that's the end of the POW. On the seventh day is important, children. The seventh day sees two things. One, when Hannah comes out of her bedroom, she realizes that the servants had tied their belongings and they were about to leave. Means, probably they were saying that, okay, now we are not going to be with you because they consider them as traitors, and therefore they've decided to leave. And the second important thing that happens is that the messenger comes to their house. Now, when he comes to their house in the evening, Hannah and Sadao are taken aback and afraid, thinking that probably the servants have gone and lodged a complaint against them with the police. And when the messenger comes and tells them the old general is in pain again, Hannah immediately says, "Is that all?" So you can see that her anxiety was that, oh my God, probably they have gone ahead and informed the police. But it was nothing. The general was in pain and Sadao was taken to the general. While leaving, Sadao looked at Hannah, and it says on page 40, the first dialogue. He gazed down into her anxious eyes. "I must get rid of this man for your sake," he said in distress. "Somehow I must get rid of him." So immediately after that, we see in the story the scene changes, and it seems that Sadao must have told the general that all that has happened, and I have given him medical aid and now he's fine. And the first thing that the general says, "I understand fully, but that is because I once took a degree in Princeton. So few Japanese have." Now, can you see that prejudice against your own people? He feels that he's one up. Why? Because he's got an American degree. Now, he is the general. He has also taken his degree from Princeton. And general is trying to tell that I am at par with you. You know, you also went to America for your higher studies. I went, and I can completely empathize what you are going through. And very soon, the general realizes that he cannot let anything happen to Dr. Sadao, because he feels that what if something happens to me? And the first thing that he says is, do you think I can withstand one more such attack? And Sadao, being very smart, takes advantage of the situation and says, not more than one. And then the general says, certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you. As a result, general knows that he is indispensable, and therefore he offers to get the POW killed by sending his assassins, hired assassins. Before this, I would like to draw your attention towards one more thing. On page 40, towards the end, there is this paragraph where the general is trying to think that why he cannot let anything happen to Sadao is, he says, it seems a pity that we cannot better combine the German ruthlessness with the American sentimentality. He feels that Sadao has this, and that is why he cannot take a risk, he cannot let him go behind the bars, and therefore he makes this offer. But of course, as we have seen in the chapter, the general is too self-absorbed. He forgets about the promise he made to the doctor. He forgets to send the assassins. The doctor and his wife are still going through that turmoil. The wife doesn't know that doctor has made this kind of an arrangement. Every night, Dr. Sadao waits for the assassins to come, but nothing happens. And finally, he feels, I cannot take it any longer. And as a result, he helps the POW to escape from his house to safe shores. And he helps in all possible ways. And that is, he arranges for a stout boat, he arranges for food, water, quills, gives him a torch, gives him precise instructions, and tells him clearly, if your food runs out before you catch a boat, signal me 2 flashes at the same time. I'm reading from the chapter, by the way, page 44. In the same instant the sun drops over the horizon, do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right, but still there, signal me once. You will find fresh fish easy to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. So all these instructions clearly show us that the general sincerely wanted, I'm sorry, not the general, doctor sincerely wanted that the POW should be safe. And then 10 days have passed, and the general once again calls the doctor, and that is the time the doctor says that he has escaped. And this is when the general realizes the fault, that he has been forgetful. And that is when on page 46 he says, well, but you see, I was suffering a good deal. The truth is, I thought of nothing but myself. In short, I forgot my promise to you. I was certainly very careless, but you understand, it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. Now the general is scared. What if Sadao goes out and tells the people, tells the public that I had already shared this with the general and no help was given to me by the general? But Sadao is very smart. It says, he suddenly comprehended that the general was in the palm of his hand, and that as a consequence he himself was perfectly safe. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency. You understand? The doctor is making use of the situation. He knows that he had done his bit, and now it was for the general who should have taken care, and the general has comfortably forgotten. So now the general will ensure that nothing happens to doctor. And look at the way the general is trying to bribe him. He assures him that he would recommend him for an award. But the line after that is most beautiful on page 46, somewhere in the middle. It says, But Sadao, searching the spot of black in the twilighted sea that night, had his reward. There was no prick of light in the dusk. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone, safe, doubtless, for he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat. So Sadao had got his reward. This means that the prisoner of war had safely left the shores on a Korean boat. The lesson ends with Sadao wondering why he could not kill the prisoner of war. In fact, the last line, even I wonder, because it says, strange he thought, I wonder why I could not kill him. Yes, and just before that, he is actually thinking about all the things that he faced when he was in America. He thinks about his slatternly landlady, and he thinks about his professor of anatomy. He thinks about all the racial discrimination that he had to face. He thinks about how it was very difficult for him to find even a house in America when he was there as a student. He thinks of all the bad things that happened over there, and yet he wonders why he could not kill the POW. Yes, children, why? The answer is here. The enemy gives the message that humanism transcends all man-made prejudices and barriers. Dr. Sadao upholds the ethics of his medical profession in treating an enemy. The story is a great lesson of humanitarianism. It depicts how love and compassion can make us better human beings as opposed to prejudices and biases against other people with whom we do not share anything but the bond of being humans. And that is what Dr. Sadao has proved through this story. So now let us look at these MCQs. I'm sure you know in the new format given by CBSE, you will get MCQs in literature also. So let's quickly skim through it. How did Hannah help Dr. Sadao? I'm giving you 30 seconds. Yes, by assisting him in the surgery and all other things, washing his wounds. You can get it as a 2-marker also. So you will give 2 points that she helped him in washing the wounds of the soldier, and she also helped him in giving anesthesia to the patient. Now, children, it's very important in your 2 markers, you must write 2 points always. Why did the general not pass orders to arrest Dr. Sadao for attending to a white man? General was not in good health and needed his services. Third one, why did surgeon speak sharply to his wife to stop any disturbance that could lead to harm the wounded man? Why did Hannah wash the wounded man herself? Yes, because Yumi, if you remember, refused to help an American soldier. What kind of a person was Sadao's father? Yes, D part, a true patriot and a traditional person. How did Dr. Sadao get rid of the American soldier? All these, absolutely. Did Hannah think the Japanese tortured their prisoners of war? Why? Do you remember the example that I gave? From here, General Takima and the scars on the neck of Tom. Reminded about General Takima beating his wife. If he could be cruel to his loved ones, then what would be the treatment meted out to the prisoners of war? Draw a character sketch of the general in the lesson. Can you think of any adjectives? I'm sure you can. He was an ailing man, needs Sadao for his treatment. He was cruel. Yes, you can give the example of wife beating. He was selfish. He was self-occupied, selfish because he did not let Sadao go with the troops. Self-occupied and forgetful. He promised Sadao to help him, but he forgot about it. What memories did Sadao carry of his American landlady and his teacher of anatomy? So American landlady, slatternly landlady, remember? And his teacher of anatomy who wanted him to be perfect. Yes? So landlady, fat and slatternly, only person who welcomed him into her home, undercurrent of prevailing racism. And his teacher of anatomy remembers fondly he wanted his students to understand every minute detail of the human body. So the last question is a 5 marker. Remember, for 5 mark questions, you must give at least 4 value points. You must divide your long answers in 3 paragraphs and look at the fact that the answer flows cohesively. Okay, so you can skim through these points. To choose between professional loyalty and patriotism was a dilemma for Dr. Sadao. How did he succeed in betraying neither? He was not only a good doctor but also a patriot, patriotic Japanese as well as a dedicated surgeon. Wounded American prisoner of war washed ashore at his doorstep, initially little hesitant to save the life of this man, then decides to treat the enemy soldier as it is his ethical duty. He informs the general about the prisoner's presence in his house, agrees to have him killed by general's assassins, waits for assassins, but finally helps the prisoner to escape safely. And then the last line, I wonder why I could not kill, because humanity wins above any kind of animosity. Thank you, children. Good luck. And if there are any queries, you can type it. Thank you.